What is up? It is Maximus MMA bringing you my full card predictions for UFC Fight Night. ANKALAEV versus GUSKOV going down in the Great Abu Dhabi. It's actually a pretty decent card. Obviously, we have this sick fight poster. Man, ANKALAEV is ugly as can be. Inbred Fighting Championship of the World. But hey, we're just going to skip past that. We're going to actually build our way. We're going to go from the card opener all the way up to the main event. So to kick it off, we've got Abdul Hussein taking on Cody Gibson. Now, Abdul Hussein is making his UFC debut. He's been fighting on the regional scene. Apparently, he's finished. I don't know how he's finished if his name is Abdul Hussein, but that's another point. Hey, look, man. This is pretty much a squash match. Abdul Hussein is a pretty decent prospect. He's got decent combination punches. And I like the fact that he's been getting a lot of finishes on the regional scene because realistically, if you're going to be anything in the UFC, we all know you have to be finishing these regional scene guys. Pause. But anyways, Cody Gibson, he's really just washed as can be. I mean, he's 38 years old, right? And he's just a guy that he's had a little bit of a tough skid here. I mean, he's just gotten so slow over the past couple of years. He's beat some guys that aren't even in the UFC anymore, and then recently he got destroyed by Damon Blackshear, and then he was KO'd by Ariki Lang in, I think, like the first 30 seconds. So, yeah, I mean, it's been about a year, 9 months, I guess, since Cody Gibson has been in the octagon, but he's certainly being sent in here to lose to Abdul Hussein. So I'm going to pick Abdul Hussein to win this fight, likely by KO, because he should have a significant speed advantage in the feet, and Cody Gibson's chin is extremely sus, especially the way that he lost his last fight. So give me Hussein to win by KO. Then we've got actually a pretty good fight where the odds are going to be pretty close with Nurullo Aliev against Mike Davis. Now, Nurullo Aliev is kind of in the MMA community touted as like a Khabib 2.0. He's only 25 and a half years old, so he's very young. He's got a lot of time to build. And he just beat Shamrock by decision. Now, Shamrock is an absolute bum. I mean, Shamrock is just a disgraced MMA, especially in his last fight. I mean, he's in there showboating when he's getting his ass kicked, so I can't rate that win at all. Before that, he's gotten some decent wins against Rafael Alves and Joe Selecki, which, again, they're not really that good, but Mike Davis is certainly a significant step up in competition. Mike Davis would probably smoke Shamrock. I think that your local guy at the pub would, so that doesn't mean too much, but it's an interesting matchup because Mike Davis was on a really nice streak. I mean, he beat guys like Mason Jones and Borshev, who's not that great, Nathan Levy, who's not that great either, the Jewish Hammer, and then he lost to Fred Ziam. And that was the fight where he came back, after like a year layoff, and he just looked terrible. And look, Fred Ziam is a very good fighter, even though he just lost to Nolan. And there was a little bit of controversy there, right? Because that fight was in the Middle East, and Mike Davis and other fighters on the card were complaining that apparently they, like, painted the locker rooms, like, the day of or the day before. So there were a lot of guys saying that they were getting lightheaded in the locker room. And that's why Mike Davis kind of blamed that loss on a flat performance that he had. I don't know if I'm fully buying it. And then he KO'd Mitch Ramirez, who we know sucks. I mean, Chase Hooper destroyed him in like a couple minutes. So I don't like the inactivity for Mike Davis, especially at 34 years old almost. Mike Davis is a good fighter. You just don't know what you're going to get. And against Siam, I just didn't like his willingness to kind of be on the back foot. Nurullo Aliev is pretty decent on the feet, and he's got some good pressure grappling, but he is a decision merchant. And I almost like that for Aliev in this fight because Mike Davis's cardio has kind of been sus in the past. So this one's kind of a tough one to pick because Mike Davis might actually be the more dangerous guy, perhaps even the better overall mixed martial artist. But it's just hard to trust him. So I'm going to go with the undefeated prospect and Aliev to win this fight by decision. Probably winning at least 2 of the 3 rounds. It's just hard to see Mike Davis winning a 3rd round against a guy like Aliev. So I'm definitely going to lean Aliev in this fight by decision. Then we've got Bredson Ibero against Magomed Tuchalov. Now, Bredson Ibero is really just like he's not that good. I mean, he's really just here to like test prospects. That's clearly his role in the UFC. And he hasn't been doing a very good job of that recently. Remember, he got KO'd by Zhang Mingyang, I believe the fight before the Kyle Machado fight, but then he won a split decision. He had a good upset against DR Nurgazai, who, in hindsight, like that win at the time was really good for Ribeiro, but Nurgazai's got like that weird like tick where like he always like scrapes his eye like this, like probably 100 times over the course of a 15-minute fight. And Ribeiro started to time that a little bit and ended up getting a submission, but since then, he's been getting finished relatively easily by these other more legit prospects like Azamat Mirzakhanov, who's obviously very good, Umar Sy, who's honestly not that good, but still was good enough to beat Ribeiro. And then most recently, he lost to Abdul Rahman Yakyayev, who is actually a pretty damn good prospect. So, given the nature of what Bredson Ribeiro's role in the UFC is, I'm definitely going to be taking Tuchilov to win. I like the fact that he's been extremely active. We're looking at 4 fights essentially in the last year. This will be the 5th almost, right, if you're including an extra month, which we will for the sake of the breakdown. And he's obviously a significant favorite. Ribeiro's going to throw some hard hooks, but realistically he's probably going to get finished. It's just hard not to take the guy that's a huge favorite and clearly has some UFC backing if they're giving him the Ribeiro matchup, because Ribeiro is pretty much an easy guy at this weight class to get in your highlight reel. So I take it that's what the UFC is picking. So I'm going to go by Tuchilov by KO, because Ribeiro in the past has shown when he gets hit hard, he will be hurt and likely be finished. So give me Tuchilov to win by KO. Then actually one of the fights that I'm really looking forward to with Axel Sola taking on Ismail Bonfim. Now, look, Ismail Bonfim is kind of the runt of the litter of the Bonfim brothers. His brother just got a huge win against Bilal Muhammad in the main event, which I picked pretty confidently. And Ismail Bonfim just doesn't have any dog in him, man. Like, he beat Terrence McKinney 3.5 years ago. He got beat by Benoit Saint Denis 3 years ago in a back-and-forth fight. So, not a bad loss. BSD is obviously pretty elite, but his only win since, the last 3 years is Vince Pichel. And Vince Pichel was like 40 years old at that point. It's hard to put any stock in that at all, and he's going to decision with 40-year-old Vince Pichel, and then he's getting KO'd by Nazim Sadikov, and then Chris Padilla kind of destroyed him. And the way that Chris Padilla destroyed him is similar to how I think Axel Sola will find a KO in this fight. Chris Padilla, Ismail Bonfim is a pretty talented fighter for the first round, but once the damage starts to pile up, he tends to just wilt and give up on himself. And on the contrary, Axel Sola, despite being a Frenchman who are known for being quitters, he just had that absolute dogfight with Mason Jones. And that was a fight that I picked Sola to win, and in hindsight, again, like, you probably shouldn't pick anybody to outdog Mason Jones. But I really like the fact that Axel Sola was willing to go into the fire with him and had a decent amount of success. Before that, he beat Reese McKee, who's a guy that's been in the UFC for a while. So yeah, honestly, I'm quite confident that Axel Sola is going to get this done simply by basically dog mentality. It could be a decision, but I could also very likely see a second or third round finish. Axel Sola is a really good striker, and he's going to be going forward in this fight. Maybe Bonfim will put some pressure on him in the first couple of minutes, but again, once they start to feel the bumps and bruises and the aches and pains, I think Axel Sola's head, his brain is just going to get him this win just because he wants it more. So yeah, give me Axel Sola to win this fight by KO, because I do believe that Ismail Bonfim will wilt, and Axel Sola will likely be a part of the lock of the week to play spoilers. So then we've got another squash match here on paper with Sam Patterson looking to rebound after that terrible decision loss to Michael Page, where they essentially had a tap dancing class in front of all of the viewers for God knows what reason. Only Michael Page and Sam Patterson know. And look, Sam Patterson before that was on a nice streak, a nice finish streak with some submissions, and then he beat Danny Barlow in a pretty big upset. Danny Barlow in hindsight really isn't that great, but I was kind of high on Danny Barlow at that point, and Sam Patterson had a nice knockout in the first round, I believe, against him. Maybe it was second round, but it was early. And then he beat Trey Waters by KO again before the Michael Page snoozer. Ponzinibbio, on the other hand, has not fought for a year and 2 months, and he's a lance with a slaughter here. I mean, he's 39 years old, almost 40. And against Daniel Rodriguez, he just looks slow. Very slow. Sam Patterson's quick, man. So it's just hard to believe that he's going to be able to get a win at 39, 40 years old against Sam Patterson, who is in his fighting prime at 30. So give me Sam Patterson to win by KO. The only risk here really is that Sam Patterson has fallen in love with the hands a little bit too much, because he is really good on the ground. But after he got that Barlow KO, it seems like he's kind of fallen in love with the striking. So maybe a concern that Ponzinibbio could land a Hail Mary hook, but it's really not likely. I'm going to pick Sam Patterson quite confidently to win this fight by finish. So Sam Patterson to win, probably by KO, but I could see a world he grapples. But this is clearly a fight where they're giving Sam Patterson a great opportunity to get a highlight reel win against an aging Ponzinibbio so that people can kind of forget about the Michael Page fight. And I also heard that Michael Page, after his next UFC fight, is not going to re-sign with the UFC. Who knows? Time will tell, but I really think that they're using this fight to kind of wipe that from everybody's memory, and I think we would all appreciate that memory wipe. So give me Sam Patterson to win by KO. Then we've got another pretty decent fight with Dustin Jacoby, who continues to be disrespected here in the rankings. I mean, he's on a 3-fight win streak. Great win against Vitor Petrino, win against Bruno Lopez, and then he most recently beat Julius Walker, who is terrible. But yeah, man, like, he's been around forever, and look, he's 38. Like, I get he's getting up there in age, but some guys age differently, and Dustin Jacoby still looks quick. He clearly still has power, and I really like his fight IQ. Muhammad Saeed is undefeated coming into this matchup, but he's been beating guys that are just, right, not very good on a regional scene. I mean, we're looking 13-10, 11-4, maybe that's all right, but then 20-11, right? It just seems like too much of a jump in competition. And Muhammad Saeed on the feet, I watched some fights of his. Like, he's really, there's nothing about him that stands out where he's like spectacular. I mean, he's decent on the feet. He might have a little bit of grappling, but I just think that Dustin Jacoby, even at 38, might have a speed advantage. And I certainly like the experience of Dustin Jacoby. So I'm going to pick Dustin Jacoby to keep the ball rolling here in the light heavyweight division and hopefully get a real shot at the rankings before he's 40 years old. I think he's due. And I certainly think he'll get that kind of opportunity should he get a win against Saeed. I'm going to pick Jacoby to win by KO. This fight could get a little dicey, though, if it does go to decision. We are in the Middle East, so you have to be a little worried about that. I would say that's really my only caution on Jacoby here. Is like, it could be a weird decision because if Jacoby doesn't get him out of there, Muhammad Saeed is a pretty good tit-for-tat kickboxer. Dustin Jacoby obviously is a kickboxer, so it could get weird on the scorecard. So just a slight caution there, but I do like Dustin Jacoby to win this fight. Then we've got Thomas Peterson taking on Walter Walker. This is a fight where, like, it's kind of, I feel like this is one of the most talked about fights in this card because Walter Walker has a lot of hype because he is the heel hook monster, right? He is the only guy in the UFC that's pulling this off. He's also doing it at heavyweight. And yeah, it's pretty interesting because, like, he shows absolutely no skill until he gets into that heel hook position where he's clearly elite. I mean, and I really point out the Kennedy and Jeshiku heel hook because if you watch that fight a year ago, Walter Walker literally just, like, completely bum rushes Kennedy. Like, he literally ran at him with his head down like this. It was like, what? It was the worst takedown I've ever seen, but he got to the heel and he got the submission. So, I mean, if it works, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And then he submitted Louis Sutherland, which that was somewhat obvious because Louis Sutherland's a little bit of a scrapper on the feet, but he's kind of got like that blob build, right? I mean, his traps are like up to here. So it just seems like the kind of guy that Walter could heel hook. Now, Thomas Peterson has a similar build. He's kind of like a corn-fed kind of country boy wrestler with a little bit of stand-up. He's obviously pretty much 500 in UFC, as you can see. I mean, he beat Muhammad Usman, who's not very good. He lost to Shamil Gaziev, beat Dontel Mays, got KO'd by Petrino, and then, of course, he beat Guilherme Pat, who's completely terrible, has absolutely nothing to offer. I mean, he's just a blob. I do know a lot of people are picking Peterson here, and I don't blame them for that, because I've seen, like, a lot of shit online where they're like, oh, Walter Walker can win this fight everywhere. Like, even if he doesn't get the heel hook, he cannot strike him. First off, Walter Walker is 100% going for a heel hook. Like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Also, look at his interviews, dude. All he talks about is ripping people's heels off. So, he 100% is going for the heel hook. Now, if he can't get it, though, I am somewhat worried for him because Lucas Brzeski might actually be the worst UFC heavyweight in the last 10 years, like, unironically. Just an absolutely terrible fighter. And he lost to him in his UFC debut. Like, that was insane. Like, I still can't get that out of my head. So anybody touting Walter Walker as like this absolute lock, bro, any man that has lost to Lucas Brzeski cannot be considered a lock, man. And like, yeah, that was 2.5 years ago, and after that fight we did see Walter Walker really tone down his physique and he looked like he was taken a lot more seriously. Man, I just don't like that. I mean, he was completely death gassed after literally like a half a round against Lucas Brzeski. It was one of the worst fights I've ever seen in my life. So if he can't get the heel hook, Thomas Peterson could certainly build into this fight. I just don't think Thomas Peterson's that good, man. I'm going to take Walter Walker to win this fight by heel hook, but there is some caution on it. And yeah, like 93% is kind of crazy because honestly, like on like X and stuff, I definitely see a lot of people thinking Peterson might win. And I can see that. I think this fight is more like 60-40 Walker than what the odds suggest. So give me Walter Walker to win by heel hook against a guy like Peterson who's not an elite athlete. And yeah, if Walter Walker gets to jump up the ranks though, I don't think the heel hook is going to work. So a little worried for him. But again, if this fight goes long, Peterson's live. Honestly, a live betting opportunity potentially if Peterson starts to survive. Then we've got Abubakar Vagayev against Saigid Izgakmayev. Like, gosh, what crazy names. Yeah, Saigid, he lost to Nicholas Dalby, who Nicholas Dalby is kind of a tough out in UFC debut. Before that, he wasn't fighting for a while. I don't exactly remember why. I don't remember if it was steroids or something else, so I don't really want to accuse him of that if that's not true. But he's taken on Abu Bakar. Gosh, these names are hilarious. Who's coming into UFC and making his debut. To be quite honest with you, I don't really have too much of an opinion on this fight, so I'm kind of just going to gloss over it. For the sake of a pick, I'm going to pick Vagayev because Saigid lost to Nicholas Dalby. So I'll take the guy that's making his debut, but relatively not too confident in it because I don't really know too much about these guys, if we're being honest. However, a fight that I do know a little bit about, we've got Rizvan Kuniev taking on Tyrell Fortune. Rizvan Kuniev came to the UFC off the Contender Series, and then he lost to Curtis Blades in a decent showing for himself. I mean, to go to split decision with Curtis Blades in your UFC debut is pretty good. Clearly, UFC does want to push this guy because why else is he getting a top 6 or 7 heavyweight in his debut? And then he beat Gelton Almeida, right? Who Gelton Almeida, I believe, is out of the UFC now, the lay and pray guy. So, very good win, honestly, even though he offers no danger. Tyrell Fortune does offer a little bit of danger on the feet. I mean, we just saw him beat Marcin Tybura kind of by a controversial decision. It was pretty funny because at the end of that fight, they announced Tybura as the winner. Tyrell Fortune walked out of the octagon, and then they brought Tyrell Fortune back in to then say that he won. I don't know. Like, that was weird. I think they read the scorecards wrong or something of that nature. So, yeah. But Tyrell Fortune, he's got a little bit of grappling, a little bit of striking. He did start to fade, though, in the third round against Tybura, in a round that Tybura clearly won, in my opinion. So, I'm going to go with Kuniev here just because I think he's the better prospect, and I think that he should be able to incorporate a decent amount of clinch work on top of grappling if he needs it. And I think that we can probably bank on Tyrell Fortune likely gassing out as the fight goes on. And Tyrell Fortune, I think he has a little bit of danger, but he's not really like a guy where I'm too worried about an early KO on Kuniev, who really hasn't shown any chin problems to my knowledge. So I'm going to go with Kuniev to win this fight, probably by decision. This just seems like a decision heavyweight fight to me. And then we've got Damian Rezbecki against John Pork, Magomed Zainukov. Damian Rezbecki, I was looking at a little bit of his highlight reel, and he throws pretty well in combination, and I think that could create problems for Zainukov if he's willing to just stand on a feet with him, but I really think that Zainukov is probably just going to find some success in the kickboxing range, but I'm really expecting him to put Rezbecki on his back with some nice trips. He had a really nice throw against Lucas Caldas on the Contender Series, and yeah, clearly John Pork is the A side. His Contender Series fight on YouTube against Caldas, who is a nobody, had like 2 million views. because he's John Pork, right? So I think the UFC is probably giving him a favorable matchup. I think the Respecki is decent. I mean, he's only 24 and a half, so like he could develop into a good fighter. But he just seems kind of reckless running in. Like if you watch his fights, he does kind of run in throwing combinations, and I just think a guy being trained with Khabib like Zainukov is probably going to be able to find timely trips and takedowns when needed, even though it should be relatively competitive on the feet. So I'm going to go Zainukov by decision. And then we've got a complete lamb to slaughter with Islam Dulatov being sent in here to absolutely kill Wellington Turman. Look, this fight makes no sense. I don't know how this guy's even in the UFC anymore with Turman. I mean, lost to Andre Petroski, which is a bad loss. Lost to Randy Brown, which isn't a bad loss. And he lost to Jared Gooden, who I don't believe is in the UFC anymore. 2.5 years ago? Taking on Dulatov, who looks like an absolute destroyer. I mean, on the regional scene, he was getting finishes, and he had a nasty finish on the Contender Series, I believe, in the first round. And then he destroyed Adam Fugit in the first round, if I'm not mistaken. So, I mean, Islam Dulatov, the Ripper, he's a finisher. And Wellington Turman has not been fighting, and he's been getting finished. I guess he only got finished in his last fight, but it's hard to get a good read on Turman, and it's just also impossible to pick a guy who hasn't fought in 2.5 years against a guy like Dulatov, who's been fighting pretty often. I guess this will be a year layoff, so it's been a little bit of time off, but a guy like Dulatov, who seems like a legitimate prospect at welterweight in such a stacked division. So this to me just seems like an easy highlight reel finish for Dulatov, likely by KO, and obviously 98% of the community agrees, so not too much to say there. Then we've got co-main event, another fight that's honestly really interesting as far as making a pick, because Steve Erceg, he KO'd Matt Schnell, who, like, the wind would KO Matt Schnell at that point of his career. And then he got a fight against Pantoja for the belt, and he lost, but it was a competitive fight. It was pretty damn close. But then since then, he was on a bad streak. I mean, he got KO'd by Kai Kara France, and he lost to Brandon Moreno. And he rebounded with a win against Ode Osborne, who's kind of a bottom-of-the-barrel guy at flyweight. And then he beat Tim Elliott, who doesn't provide a lot of danger, but he's pretty crafty. Ramazan Temirov, on the other hand, is coming off a win against Charles Johnson, which I rate quite highly, but then he popped for steroids. And I heard something on the lines that the steroids were for a heart condition that Temirov has. So maybe we'll give him a pass. I don't really know the truth, but I've seen the pictures of Temirov in a build-up, and he still looks extremely strong. So that's why I'm going to be picking Temirov here to win this fight by decision. I just really like his aggressiveness on the feet. He kind of darts in and throws overhands, and his grappling's good. And if you're going to beat a guy like Charles Johnson, I think you can beat Steve Erceg. Now, maybe not being on the PEDs, he gasses out. That would really be like the only concern, but I just don't think Steve Erceg is that great. And I really think that people are going to pick Erceg, because he's kind of like a fan favorite. I mean, he gained a lot of fans when he beat Pantoja, but, dude, Temirov's probably going to win this fight. Like, I mean, I would pick Charles Johnson to beat Steve Erceg, and Temirov beat Charles Johnson. So we're going to do some MMA math here, and we're going to pick Temirov. He's obviously at a pretty big reach and height disadvantage, but I don't think that should be a problem for him. Yes, Steve Erceg has nice leg kicks and can throw a nice jab, but Temirov is, again, a blitzer who throws overhands, and he's really good on the ground if it gets there. So give me Temirov to win this fight, likely by decision. I could see why people would pick Erceg. He's been in there with better guys realistically throughout his career, but a Tim Elliott win doesn't make me think that you're going to beat Ramazan Temirov, who probably is coming back with a vengeance, if I had to say, especially if the steroids thing was a legitimate medical condition that was approved by a doctor, and it wasn't like just straight up cheating to cheat. I think he probably wants his get back, and he wants to get back on track, and a win against Steve Erceg would immediately put him into the top 10 at flyweight, which that division is absolutely stacked, and you could see Temirov getting a pretty big opportunity if he wins this fight. Same with Erceg, but give me Temirov to win this fight by decision. Then in the main event, we've got Magomed Ankalaev, who's coming back to face Bogdan GUSKOV for the first time since being KO'd by Alex Pereira in his title defense loss. Before that, of course, he was on a decent win streak against Johnny Walker, Alexander Rakic, and then obviously the Alex Pereira win in the first fight. But that second fight, I really did not like the way that ANKALAEV got walked down. He looked scared. He got backed up against the cage, and he switched, I believe, to southpaw, and he got knocked out for it. So GUSKOV, on the other hand, was a guy I was pretty damn high on. I mean, I really liked him against Zach Pauga. I really liked him against Ryan Spann, who's a coin flip fighter. I thought he would beat Billy Elikana, who's actually relatively decent in the unranked realm of light heavyweight. And then he KO'd Nikita Krylov. Then he fought Jan Blachowicz in a fight that I thought that he would be able to just beat kind of the old man Jan, the legendary Polish power. But yeah, he really disappointed me in that fight. I think that's why the odds are so nutty, even though I don't agree with them. Like, I think that GUSKOV definitely has a chance to win. He's a good striker. He's got relatively heavy hands. He's not the fastest, though. And that was something, again, that really surprised me against Jan Blachowicz. Jan Blachowicz, in many moments, looked faster than GUSKOV. So that was a little concerning. But Magomed Ankalaev is largely a kickboxer. And if this becomes a kickboxing fight, I don't think that the odds should be this wide. Especially with a guy coming off a loss. Like, the way that ANKALAEV lost, like, to be embarrassed like that and lose your belt and get completely walked down and just, again, look scared, to be minus 460 in your next fight is crazy, especially against a guy like GUSKOV, who is on a good streak despite the Jan Blachowicz disappointment. This one's so tough, bro, because I want to pick GUSKOV, but I can see why people are picking Magomed Ankalaev, but honestly, now I'm talking myself into it. I'm picking Bogdan GUSKOV to win this fight. I'm not extremely confident in it, but I think, like, at these odds, I think that GUSKOV might be worth a small swing. I just don't like the way that Ankalaev lost his last fight. I think that if GUSKOV comes in there with the mentality of Alex Pereira in the rematch, like, hey, let's go walk this guy down, let's make him fight, I think he can win. I think if it turns into tit for tat, though, Ankalaev might be a step quicker on the feet, and he might win kind of a boring decision. But, man, I feel like GUSKOV could maybe test the chin of Ankalaev. It's just hard to trust, man. So I'm going to go with Bogdan GUSKOV to get this fight done by KO. But a decision would not surprise me either. So, yeah, that's been my full card breakdown. Honestly, some really good spots here, though. Some fights I'm a little iffy on, but there are some that I'm really confident in. So I'm going to release a Lock of the Week video here real quick after this, just to kind of break down, right, just get to the chase about the most confident picks. So, yeah, hopefully you enjoyed the quick breakdown here. As always, it was Maximus MMA. And, yeah, I will see you guys in the next one. So, peace.